Record to the cloud. All right, we'll give it a couple minutes to give folks time to log in. Not too long. Okay. Good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Jessica from Greenlight and we are thrilled to host tonight's event with Zachary Sergi launching his new book, Major Detours, a Choices novel, which is just published today. He's going to be talking with Jessica Goodman and Julia Rubin, so you are in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Zachary, Jessica, Julia, and the team at Running Press for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. Though we're not able to host events in our store spaces right now, our community of authors and readers is still here. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Now, just a couple housekeeping things. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see that you're here though, and there are a couple different ways you can interact with the authors and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first one is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like a speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. It's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and interact with fellow attendees. If you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author, please post that question in the Q&A. You'll find that by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons. We'll be pulling questions only from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program. And very importantly, tonight's featured book, Major Detours, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. You can shop in person in our bookstore locations every day of the week, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Fulton Street and 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Flatbush Avenue. And you can purchase Zachary's book and many others on site. Or order online at greenlightbookstore.com for quick pickup in the store or for shipping anywhere in the US. I'll drop the buy link in the chat in a moment. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. And Zachary is going to be stopping by the store to sign books next week. So if you'd like a signed or personalized book, please make a note in the order comments and check out online, and your book will be ready around September 17th. Okay, some introductions. Our interviewers tonight are Jessica Goodman and Julia Rubin. Jessica is the op-ed editor at Cosmopolitan and the author of They Wish They Were Us and They'll Never Catch Us. She's presented both of those books at Greenlight, and we're proud to call her our neighbor, so it's fun to have her with us again tonight. And Julia is the editorial director for culture and features at Vox, overseeing The Goods, The Highlight, and Vox's entertainment coverage. She's also a Greenlight neighbor, as it turns out. Sometimes she writes, and when she does, it's usually about teens, toys, or wealth. They are both going to be talking tonight with our featured author, Zachary Sergi, who is the queer writer of nearly a dozen works of interactive fiction, including the Heroes Rise and Versus series. Zachary was raised in Manhattan, studied creative writing at Regis High School and the University of Pennsylvania, and now lives in Los Angeles with his husband, where he also writes for television. Zachary's new book, Major Detours, is a mystical, interactive YA novel about the powers of friendship, self-discovery, and tarot that follows four friends on a road trip turned discovery quest inspired by a special tarot deck inherited from one of their grandmothers. This unique choose-your-own-adventure is, as Jessica Goodman put it herself, dazzling and brilliant, full of wonder, winding paths, and rollicking adventure. So you're in for something special tonight. Zachary's going to start us off with a reading from the book, and then he'll be joined by Jessica and Julia. Zachary, please take it away.
Taking myself off mute is probably a good way to start. All right. Hello. So we're going to start with a reading from Major Detours. We'll explain exactly what Major Detours is as soon as we get through the reading, but we figure we'll start you right at the beginning. Okay, so if you want to take a look, that's part one, Wanderers. And we're going to begin with our main character, Amelia. Okay, here we go. Soda bubbles fizzle on my tongue and French fry salt coats my fingertips. Vintage Mariah plays on the stereo and white lines fly by underneath the van. There's nothing around but steep mountains, an open road, and my three best friends in the whole world. The next 2 weeks stretch ahead of us like a highway. The last 2 weeks before we all head off in different directions. The best 2 weeks of our lives, we promised. I can already feel how good it's going to be now, just 2 hours in, with junk food in my gut and a sugar rush buzzing in my veins. With my eyes set on the vivid blue sky and the dry green brush, on the puffed white clouds slung above the red hills. Blue and green, white and red, the colors of the tarot. or at least the colors of this tarot, our most prized possession. I really shouldn't be holding it with my fast food fingers, but I want to keep it close. This tarot deck, well worn and beloved, was the inspiration for our road trip. It contains multitudes, histories and memories, mysticism and mysteries, the exact kind we hope to solve on this trip. Amelia, Chase says. I know what he really means. Don't touch the deck with grubby fingers. I may have inherited the cards from my grandma, but they mean just as much to Chase. Is that thing really going to beep for the entire trip? Logan asked from the driver's seat. That thing has a name, Cleo answers from the passenger side. And Toki is our official trip mascot, so you should learn to love them now. Cleo dangles her keychain beside Logan's face, and the rainbow glitter egg nearly brushes his cheek. She got that Tamagotchi back when we were freshmen, when she cracked it open and configured it to live forever. Cleo never met a rule she didn't love to bend. You'd better give Toki a kiss before they throw a tantrum. Now, I thought we agreed tantrums are only allowed in Charvan on Wednesdays, I say, watching Chase bristle. His parents gifted him this ancient Volkswagen van when we turned 16, and he has since meticulously transformed it into our happy place. We both decided to name this mobile headquarters Charvan, after the Tarot's chariot card. Chase would prefer we keep Charvan curbside forever, but I'm thrilled we finally get to take it out on this long overdue adventure. Remind me why I agreed to come on this trip again, Logan sighs. To answer that, Chase leans forward and kisses him on the side of his neck. At first glance, it'd be easy to question how buttoned up Chase and athleisure Logan go together, but they've been the perfect couple for years. Oh right, my brainiac boyfriend has me under his spell, Logan says. Chase smiles, settling back into his seat. He then returns to his combination lock journal, the little leather notebook that's like his permanent appendage. No one, not even Logan, gets to read inside that locked journal, but I bet Chase is going over his plan for the front end of our trip. Personally, I'd rather see where the road takes us, but that's why Chase and I work so well as best friends. He plans, I deviate. He thinks, I act. He writes, I talk. Okay, I think the next junction is coming up pretty soon, which means you all know what time it is. Cleo groans from the front, but Chase snaps his journal closed. It's tarot time. I can't believe we're actually going through with this, Cleo says, her short black hair swinging as she turns to face us. She sports a pair of sunglasses with green triangular lenses, one of my favorites in her legendary collection. This is a perfect idea and you know it, I answer. Chase plans our general route, but we let the tarot cards decide the specifics. It's perfectly balanced. I reach my hand over and squeeze Chase's. He's more like a brother to me than a friend. Really, he is my NRLP, my non-romantic life partner. Plus, a sometimes maddening reminder of my complete lack of an actual romantic life partner. The two of us separating for college is still a thought I cannot process, so I focus instead on pulling the tarot cards out of their faded cardboard box. All these years later, they still have that fresh cardstock smell with just a hint of lavender. I researched 2 occult shops on the way to Joshua Tree, Chase begins, flipping through his journal. They're on alternate routes, so we need to decide where to stop. No, we need to let the cards decide, I add. Which reading configuration do you think we should use? Chase furrows his dark brows, his brain thrumming like an engine. Obviously, we need to use one of the simpler configurations, he begins. I'd say the 2-card yin and yang, but a classic 1-card pull should do. Couldn't agree more, I answer, beginning to shuffle the cards. As usual, I can feel our added homemade cards brushing my palms, their laminated edges slightly thicker than the rest. Grandma's deck has always been missing 4 cards, ever since she bought it at a yard sale years ago. This deck is full of gorgeous, seemingly hand-painted images, so when Chase and I were kids, we crafted our own far inferior replacement cards. We've been obsessed with the tarot for as long as we can remember, likely because Grandma taught us everything we know about it. One thing we've never learned, however, is where this deck really comes from. We haven't been able to find any mention of anything like it online. Growing up, Grandma always said she'd take me and Chase on an adventure to find the missing cards once we were older, a kind of mystic road trip where the tarot would be our guide. Grandma might not be able to make that trip with us anymore, but when Chase and I were deciding how to spend the last 2 weeks before college, our answer was clear. Any key differences between the 2 shops, I ask? The first is called Eastern Light Tarot, and the second is Mother Earth Occult and Antiques. That gives us plenty to go off of. Perfect. Cut the deck and draw the first card, I say, holding out the stack toward Chase. Everyone ready to see where the tarot takes us first? Am I the only one who finds this spooky? Cleo asks, craning to watch. Spooky or not, That junction is coming up in a few miles, Logan says, glancing at the GPS. Please let the tower proceed with some speed. Not wasting another moment, Chase pulls the top card from the freshly cut deck. He looks down at it and grins for a few seconds. When he finally lays the card down, I see why. I gasp out loud when I glimpse her green goddess eyes staring up at me. The Empress. Well, that couldn't be clearer, Chase says. The Empress stands at a doorway to transformation, beckoning us to take action. But most importantly, the Empress is the Mother Nature figure. So, Mother Earth Occult it is? I sigh. Chase always reads the cards like an encyclopedia, analyzing their symbols historically and isolating their meanings from context. It's not that he's wrong, it's more that, deep down, I've always felt the tarot is more personal than that. Not to mention, it's just like Chase to overlook the fact that the Empress is my personal tarot card expression. And that brings us to our very first choice. So if you want to take a look, literally looks like there's a choice on the page. So I'm going to read the choices, and Julia and Jessica are going to make the choice for us. So option number 1, since the Empress is my card representation, I say, I think I should be the one to decide where we go next. She is a queen in charge, after all. And then our second option is, I couldn't agree more, I say, the Empress is Mother Earth. It's the obvious direction based on the intention we set. All right, what do we think?
Queen.
Queen?
I think so too.
Okay. So there's little bolded keywords, which I will talk about what that means later, but queen is our bolded keyword for now. Just going to read the outcome and then we'll get our discussion going. Okay. Is this how it's going to be every time, Chase whines? I lay the foundation and you make the decision, like always. That's not how it always is. The Empress just happens to be my card. And for your information, I was going to choose Mother Earth Occult anyway. I watch as Chase resist the urge to respond, especially since he got his way in the end. Sometimes I feel like he pushes back on purpose, just for the sake of arguing. Then again, I am indeed an Empress at heart, spontaneous, commanding, demanding. One of the first things Grandma taught us was how to find our expressions in the major arcana, adding up the digits in our birthdays and combining the sum. Mine is August 1st, 2001, which equals 12. With a number that low, I then had to choose to keep 12, the Hanged Man, or add 1 to the 2 to make 3, the Empress. For little girl me, this choice was easy. Chase's own birthday is October 27th, 2001, which brings his final son before, making him the Emperor. It seemed so fitting back then, proof that we were the perfect complementary pair. However, the older we got, the more we realized this really meant we were more like balanced opposites. The Major strikes again, Cleo says. Not that you two tarot wizards care about third opinions, but I agree with Mother Earth Occult as the outcome. Then it's unanimous, Logan adds, because that one is closer and I really need to pee. I can feel Chase bristling once again at Cleo's comment, but he keeps quiet. Amelia and Chase, the Empress and the Emperor. Major Amelia, named after the bold and chaotic personalities of the tarot's first half. Minor Chase, named after the precise and numbered second half, structured like a traditional deck of cards. Grandma always believed that what really makes the tarot so universal is the way it draws strength from two opposing halves that make up a whole. Thankfully, Chase and I have always understood that our differences only make us stronger, at least most of the time. All right. So that's the first little snippet of Major Detours. And to get us kicked off, I actually, I'm glad we ended up going that route because I looked up Jessica's and Julia's tarot numbers. So it's a thing I learned in a guidebook that if you add up the numbers in your birthday, you get your tarot type. So Jessica, I believe you're 4/23/1990, right? I hope you don't mind me saying that publicly. Sorry.
Share it far and wide. Oh, I'm so excited.
Okay, so that gets you up, if you add up all those numbers, it adds you up to 29, which gets you to 11. Sorry, I switched this in my notes. Right, so Jess, yes, so you were the, how did I mess this up? Okay, there we go. Your strength, sorry, okay. So this is the strength card. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, I love it. Is that a wolf howling at the moon?
It is, right? So what strength basically means is that you kind of use like inner strength to like tame an inner demon, or that like a gentle application of kindness is often better than what you would typically think strength is. So yeah, that would be your card. And then Julia, your number is added up to 10, which is the Wheel of Fortune, which is actually kind of traditionally an ominous card because it usually means a reversal of fortune. But my more positive take on it is that it's all about like the wisdom and the lessons that you take away from a challenge. And when a reversal happens, analyzing why and growing from it.
So
So yeah,
kind of you to give me the more generous reading here.
the entire tarot philosophy in the book leans towards the more positive.
Sure.
My own one adds up to 5, so I get to be the Hierophant, which is one who channels wisdom, which I kind of like. So, as a writer,
Wise.
yeah.
I like that. Well, Zach, it is extremely fun to hear you read the book that I loved and read. Well, read and loved. Had to read it first. Knew I would love it though. And I have mine right here. So 1, click the link in the chat, buy it. You'll notice on this beautiful cover, it says it's a choices novel. So my first question is, what does that mean? And how does it work? And what makes it different than other interactive novels?
Yes, I'll try to get through that as concisely as possible because it could talk about it forever. So the first thing to know about a choices novel is that the team and I designed it to kind of be read more like a novel than a typical choose your own adventure. So when there's a choice, it is more about defining your character and what they believe and how they feel and their relationships than it is about anything else. If the choices affect the plot, that's great, and we love that, but that's not always the goal of providing a choice in a choices novel. And the format grew out of obviously a choose your own adventure novel, which were popular in the 80s, or the whole series of novels. I don't know, I grew up reading the Goosebumps choose your own scare ones in the 90s personally, which were modeled after choose your own adventure. And then, so we can't call it choose your own adventure because that's the name of the brand actually. So the genre is called interactive fiction technically. And with the dawn of iPhones and apps, a lot of interactive novels began popping up digitally, some of mine included. And the hallmark of that is that the plots and the characters are as sophisticated as any other novel necessarily. And the choices can be a lot more complicated because there can be coding that's invisible within, however it's published digitally. So when we thought about, and my editor approached me about how do we make that a print novel, we wanted to bring that spirit of interactive choose your own adventure all grown up into a modern novel. So we like to say that a choices novel has 3 cornerstones. So the first is that choose your own adventure novels are traditionally very what they call bushy. So meaning you read a lot of little stories, right? So you kind of read a story and then you go back to the beginning and you read a totally different story. So it almost, the branches look like a bush. In a choices novel, you're reading the spine of a linear plot. So you're always going forward. So every time you make a choice, you're going to be skipping pages, but always progressing forward. And there will be branches and there's some alternate endings, but largely it's an experience like reading a novel first and foremost. The second thing is that there's a system of keywords. So like Queen, for example, from before, there's a handy little guide in the back if you want to keep track of choices like that, so that we can have callback to certain choices. So maybe you'll be in chapter 4 and the book will ask you, what choice did you make in chapter 1, if it's a really important choice. And the cool thing is that once you're done reading, you can plug all of those keywords into a series of personality quizzes and profiles that we have in the back, which will be super cool. And lastly, we are out of the kind of middle grade world. We're in edgy YA land. So steamy relationships, plot twists, there's cults going on, tarot stuff. So those are the kind of the big cornerstones of what defines a choices novel. And now that I've explained it, I am dying to hear what reading it is like because I haven't really gotten to talk to many people that have. So that's what I want to hear next.
I mean, when I read it for the first time, I was so like, I'd never read anything like it, I think. And I was so excited by the idea of like choosing and like getting to decide where the story went. And it was so fun in that way. But I did like go back and read the alternatives like after I chose one. And that was really fun. But I, was very lucky and very cool to read an early copy of this. So when I got it in the hardcover, like, I don't think I hadn't seen any of the like cool worksheets or like study, like kind of like guides in the back. And I was so impressed by like how much interaction there is in this book, like not just in the reading, but also like it's like so engaging. And you know, as an adult, I'm like thrilled by it, but I can only imagine like being a teenager and being like, wait, there's like a whole other like part of this book, and like I'm allowed to write in it, and like have like, you know, it feels like a real, you know, like hefty novel, but then also invites you to like participate in a really creative way, which is so different than anything else on the market. So I was just like thrilled by that part of it after, and like and really surprised because like I hadn't seen that in the early version. But yeah, I mean, the act of like the experience of reading it is so engaging because it's like forcing you to be part of the process.
Yeah, it's part of, I have tried not to encourage anyone to buy it a certain way, but if you have the choice, I think physically is the best way to read it, because
Yeah.
we really design it so that you could like write in it and we have columns and note sections. And I want to give a shout out to my editor and Brittany and I worked on it a lot, but the designer, Marissa Raybuck, was a genius in terms of making it all look and flow very nicely at the end. So yeah, a lot of thought went into that part.
I bet. Yeah. Well, my question for you is what, so like there's so many choices in the book, obviously. But like what makes a good choice? Like, are there bad choices? Like, did you design it wanting people to choose one option, or like how did that come about for you?
Yes. So it is certainly, if anyone's, so I've written 8 of these digitally before. So in kind of it's a different beast. And a huge lesson was learning not to do exactly that, right? So to not have people choose the things that I want them to choose and to really make it a choice. So part of what goes into that is some stuff I learned from kind of my first publishing home, Choice of Games. And unlike Choose Your Own Adventure, which really often has like a right or a wrong, like you die a lot of the times if you don't choose the right thing. So we don't have any of that necessarily you're always going to get to the end of the novel. How you get there and what the end looks like will be different. And how I've come to define a good choice, and how many other interactive authors do, is whether it operates on multiple, I've actually never axes. I guess that's the plural of axis, right? Multiple axes. So like spokes in a wheel. So there's no right or wrong answer. There's only what's right or wrong for your character. And often deciding what's most important to them will require sacrificing something else. So maybe you're going to make a choice that really acts on what you believe in or for your character, but goes against a relationship, and you kind of mess something up there. So a lot of the choices are deciding what's most important. And the other cool thing is, because we're all about the tarot, I try to infuse a lot of tarot mythology in it. So each part of them, there are 4 parts to the novel, centered around the 4 different suits of the minor arcana in the tarot. And we'll go over what that is a little later, I hope. But for now, a lot of the choice themes were centered around, so for example, the first one is wands, and that's very about faith and spirituality. And the existence of the tarot itself kind of begs the question, can you predict the future? So does fate exist, or do you believe in free will? So there's a character, for example, when you're making this choice, who's your best friend, who believes in free will, and your boyfriend believes in destiny. And they're often arguing about it. And you're the one who has to make a choice, what to do with the cards in terms of that, but also deciding between your friends. So that's a big one. I'm actually curious, I know it's a hugely loaded question, but where you two fall on that, the free will versus destiny debate.
Free will, but like everything is random. Like I almost think it's like, I think of like a third choice. Like there's no such thing as destiny. You can, like, free will exists, but so much is just like randomness. It's a little nihilistic, I understand.
100%.
I've never really like thought about this in an existential way, but I guess now's a good time. I think I believe in free will with like a hint of destiny and fate in it. Like I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah,
but I do believe that everybody has free will.
I believe it. I weirdly believe both at the same time, and I don't know if you're allowed to do that because I can't quite explain it, but some version of, yes, you have complete agency over your life and your choices matter, but also there's a plan to everything. I'm a big believer in things work out the way they should, and there's a flow to the universe that we don't quite understand. So I don't really have a linear explanation for that, but that's one of the things that we explore. Another big one is, do you believe in ghosts and hauntings and mediums? So I'm curious where you two fell on that, because that's a choice thing that comes up a lot. So I know asking the hard-hitting questions.
I do not.
I believe in ghosts.
Yeah.
Hard no for Julia.
Oh, no.
Zach knew.
I think I like to believe that spirits can cross over to give us signs and messages, but I don't think that they're always necessarily obvious, and I don't think that they like want to engage. If that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. And I tried to remove a lot of my own personal beliefs on this, but this is part of it. Like, I believe when it comes, my meta belief in all this is when it comes to anything spiritual, religious, mystic, right? So tarot cards, astrology, ghosts, there is a hint, there's some truth there, right? There's like some wisdom there, there's some truth there. We probably don't understand it fully. And there's anytime that we deal in those things, there's going to be a lot of scam artists. So I think 99% about what we see with mediums and ghosts and all that stuff is with the intent to get money or power or whatever. But I do think that it exists in rare forms, and there's something going on we don't get that breaks through every so often.
Yeah, like I think I have like no interest in seeking out like a professional spiritualist in any way, but if it like feels apparent in my life, I'm like, yeah, let's work with that.
Well,
I love coincidence. Like coincidence, I find very special, and I think a lot about like energy, and like I feel like in terms of like there's good energy here, there's bad energy here, but I don't know. But I've never thought about it in terms of like spirit from beyond.
Yes. Yeah. Well, as you both experienced, those are like choice themes that kind of come up a lot, right? You actually end up in the second part going to a haunted house where someone claims to be a medium, and you kind of have to decide whether you believe any of that is real or not. So I'm glad we got to talk about that a bit.
Well, I want to know more about tarot. Like, it is a world that I like know about from being like a person in the world, but like have never engaged with myself. And it's so richly drawn in the novel. So I want to know a bit more about, like how else does the tarot play in, and how did you think of it as you were writing?
Yeah. So for those out there who don't know, right, a tarot deck is composed of two different parts. There's the major arcana, which is 22 cards, kind of archetypal symbols. So like we went over the Empress, the Emperor, strength, those kinds of things. And it tells a hero's journey in an arc. And then there's the minor arcana, which looks a lot like a traditional deck of cards with 4 suits. So I researched the tarot a lot for this. But I wanted to kind of infuse it into the novel in some obvious ways and some subtle ways. So one of the more subtle things, which I'm curious if readers will connect to and pick up on, is at the top of every chapter, there's the illustration. And that illustration you end up learning is so I should also say, there's a unique system of tarot that a fictional character has invented in the novel. Yeah, so that's a nice wand going on there. So that's a symbol for the magician, for example, which is the second or the third in the major arcana journey. So along with this fictional kind of tarot mythology is the kind of meta philosophy that tarot cards actually aren't at their best use as kind of like a tool to predict the future, like a lot of people is the most common conception. It's really a form of therapy. So if someone reads to you a potential set of events in your life, how do you feel about them and how do you react? And you're like a Rorschach ink blot test, right? Your reaction to and what you see is much more important than what the actual prediction is. So anyway, so working off of that, a huge thing that I loved is weaving in the story of the major arcana through the chapters. So some chapters have very overt references to the major arcana step it's on, and some are super subtle. So I'm very curious to see if readers kind of like can suss out the connections between those. The much more obvious part is that there are 4 different parts in the novel, and they're each structured after one of the suits of the minor arcana, because the deck artist, who is our kind of cult leader, who were looking to solve his or find the missing cards in his deck, arranged a system where there are organizations around each. So for example, for wands, which is one of the first suits, he named them the Wanderers. For cups, they're the coupled. For pentacles, the repentant, and for swords, the sworn. So each part is centered around that. And one of the other things I did, which I'm going to say out loud, but I'm curious if readers who don't hear this pick up on, is all the descriptions and the metaphors in each part are modeled after that. So for example, in the first part, we're in the desert, it's all about red, fire, wands. So it's all the descriptions are to do with those things. And in the second part, we're by the ocean and it's water and it's more about relationships. So there's a lot of like watery metaphors and descriptions there. In the third part, we're in a forest with a lot of green trees and that kind of thing. So all the descriptors are in that world. And then the last part is mountains and air. So those are kind of things that are the more subtle parts tied to this. So yeah, so there's tarot all over this. I'm actually curious, and it's okay if you did not, but did either of you fill out the part at the end where you can decide, it sorts you kind of like Harry Potter sorting hat into one of the corners?
I feel
I
like
haven't done it yet.
Um,
I haven't used it.
I've done it for myself a bit, and I always end up in coupled, which I think is interesting. So it's like, but I love blue, ocean, water, relationships, and like flow. So it makes sense that I was end up there. But yeah,
This is amazing and like so complex, I think, especially as someone who like, I have like a very basic Wikipedia surface level knowledge of like what tarot is and how it can be used in life. Like, what kind of research did you do? Like, was this like just a part of your brain that you'd always been interested in? Because this is like what you just described and like what's in this book seems just like so much, there's so much knowledge behind it and so much like, you know, you just come across as such an authority. Like, what went into making that happen? It's amazing.
well, thank you. That's very sweet. I would say first and foremost, a few friends who have read it, the first thing that they say is that the tarot stuff and the interactivity feels very easy to get into. So
Yes.
I credit my editor a lot with that, because I can get very, as probably by my answers, I can get very intellectual about this stuff. So she worked with me a lot to make it. So the goal was the choices, the tarot, it's very easy to get into. So that's first and foremost. And then yes, there's this whole like web of knowledge behind me, both on interactivity and tarot. I had actually got into tarot because on a vacation, a good family friend read my cards for the first time. And I was very resistant to it at first, but she kind of had this beautiful philosophy behind it and beautiful cards. It's the same deck that I have shown before. And I kind of fell in love with it. I've always been super into mythology, superheroes, and there was just a lot of like meaning and culture and history there. So I just kind of got into like learning about it. And at the time I ended up writing a TV pilot that went through several years of development hell. But so I researched a lot for that. And then when I first started talking to Brittany, my editor, about a project, we had talked about a genre road trip. So that was the other unique thing about this novel. It wasn't something I wrote beforehand. It was something my editor and I drafted on proposal together, with the idea that we would find an interactive format together. So she had pitched that the team was interested in something that was a road trip with a genre element. And I had just come off doing all this tarot research. And I was like, how is the tarot? And they're all huge lovers of tarot at Running Press Teens. So it ended up being a perfect fit. So I ended up doing a lot more research as a result. But the goal was, and Brittany's mandate for me was never to explain the cards in more than two different ways, right? So if you're going to give a card meaning, one is enough, two is the most, and no more than that, which really helped my brain streamline. I think earlier drafts, probably one that you read, Jess, was like, I would have like 4 or 5 different card interpretations and it was just too overwhelming. So God bless editors, basically.
Yes. Well, it comes off very smooth, especially as someone who like doesn't have a lot of tarot knowledge. It was not hard to get into at all.
Good. That was the goal, was like very, very introductory level interactivity and tarot stuff going on in this book.
Well, I loved the tarot part, something I truly knew nothing about, beyond wiki level surface. But what I do know a little bit more about is road trips, and we've been on road trips together. And I wanted to know a little bit about that. So like, yeah, like how, like, I think it's such like a fun way to show like a winding journey and like to go to all of these places. And I think, you know, the way you're explaining, yes, like they go to all these destinations and they're all really different and they're the characters they meet along the way. And yeah, I just wanted to know a bit more about what it was like kind of putting together the road trip element. Like there's like a lot of like high concept here.
Yeah, it's my lot in life to do everything like high concept on top of high concept on top of high concept. It's I don't mean to do it, and it happens every single time. So yeah, so the road trip was a super fun part of it. That was also part of what Brittany had brought to the table to begin with, but inadvertently it became you know, I wrote a good chunk of this during the pandemic also, and road trips were kind of all the only option we had for a while. So it was a really cool way to dive in, and then way to get the tarot mythology out, right? Because there are these elemental parts to it. So, and being in Southern California, I'm from New York, but I've lived in Southern California for like 11 years now. So we have all those things. We have mountains, we have desert, we have ocean, we have forest. So in writing it, we kind of did take a few inspiring road trips. So a trip with a good friend and my husband to Solvang made it into the book, which is a part right outside Santa Barbara. It's a little Dutch village. My husband's family has gone up to Mammoth Mountain, which has a big lake, and up in Northern California. So a bunch of that stuff made it in. And my favorite thing about road trips is always like the snacks and the food and stuff. So I try not to get too in the weeds on that, but including some of that was important also. And then music was another big part. There's some songs that I mentioned. Again, I tried not, a lot of this was getting them to their destinations and getting them moving, right? We didn't want to be in the car with them or the van for too long, but whenever they were, I tried to bring those road trip vibes in. And as you both know, I'm a crazy person when it comes to playlists. So I made a very expensive playlist for this, which I curated down. And like, so if anyone's interested, it's on Spotify to kind of like curate while you read the different, there are 4 different parts that feel sonically similar to the tone of the book. So but I'm dying to know what, Julie, you just went on a road trip. What is your like go-to like soundtrack or snack or?
Truly, literally got home late last night from a road trip. Wow. Okay. So I made an unpopular but delicious choice yesterday, which was I wanted both Cheetos Puffs and like Chex Muddy Buddies, which like are disgusting hand foods. Like you just like, it's a huge mess. It is absolutely not things to eat in a car, but was delicious. I always love like I need something like kind of salty, need something sweet from the gas station, and then just like full on fast food, maybe like a regional favorite if possible. Otherwise, you know, like a McDonald's, we did a Wendy's breakfast, but I like love junk generally. So road trip food is like extremely up my alley.
Yeah, I'm a huge McDonald's person, would always get a full meal and like have to get a McFlurry without.
Yeah, because you got to dip your fries.
Exactly. I also love those Fritos barbecue like flavor twists. Have you ever had those?
Oh,
they have a very satisfying crunch. I don't even know if they make them anymore, but last time I got them on a road trip. And a Slurpee. Like I love like a slushy treat if I can manage it. But yeah, do you have any go-tos, Jess?
I just always need a sweet, always need a salty. Preferably the sweet is also a gummy situation, like a sour peach and then like Cheez-It or something.
Yes,
it's delicious.
True.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody also that that you all can ask Zach questions too. So if you have questions for Zach, feel free to drop them in the little Q&A bubbly thing, and we'll get to all those pretty soon too. But I have a question about your writing process, because as you know, I'm also a YA writer, and the task of writing fiction for teens is a great one and a wonderful one, but it can often be really hard, and everybody has a really different writing process when it comes to writing fiction. So I'm curious, like, you know, I mean, what is your writing process is like the biggest open-ended question ever, but like specifically for writing an interactive novel, like how do you do this? How do you keep everything organized? Like, it's like, I have no idea how I would go about like outlining something like this where there's so many choices. Like how do you do it, Zach?
Yeah, it's funny because I've learned a lot more about my process from talking to other writers about how they do stuff. You included, both of you included, actually, and so I guess the big thing that I've learned is I'm a huge outliner, right? So, and not only like functionally, but if I sit down to write a scene and I don't know what purpose it's serving and where it's headed, and I can't write it. So I'm not good at like, so I need to like know this is what I'm trying to achieve here. And once I know that, I can be more fun and playful and spontaneous and allow myself to surprise myself. So the big balance has been learning, yes, I have these big structural outlines, but how to leave them open-ended enough to A, allow for choice, and B, allow for surprises. So I've gotten semi-good at a big outline that I can pivot in certain directions, and I try not to plot the endings as much as I do the beginnings. So big outline, certainly. I wish I was one of those writers who could like sit and like discover it as it comes to me, and certainly that happens with characters and certain plots, and you know, the more time you spend with it, the better you know it. So you're going to make better decisions than you did in outlining phase. But I also, the other thing that I do is which I think you both know, I write by hand, which is bizarre because most of my stuff has been published digitally. So, and it has a lot of coding involved. So, but there's something about sitting with a pen and paper and an outline and putting my phone across the room and closing my computer. It's the only way my brain can populate. When I sit in front of a computer, I just physically, nothing comes out. And then it's easy to procrastinate on a computer. So I'm so jealous of writers, which I think you can do this, Jess, where you write your first drafts and everything on a computer, right? Very jealous, cannot do that. So the only upside is that typing up whatever I write by hand ends up being an edit process. So I hope whatever time I lose by writing and typing, I gain by editing along the way. So I don't know if those answered that end of the question, but.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. But also like the outlining portion like totally makes sense for all fiction, but like especially for a choices novel, like I feel like you really need to have the options in, like you need to have the outline in place so that you know what the options are going to be, and then you could like write what happens after the options. It's like your brain is just working in like a totally different way than you would be if you were writing like a traditional novel, it seems like.
Yeah, and it probably like sometimes or most of the time it'll be like, okay, you need a choice here about like the ghosts and the medium, right? And I want to know what that choice is. I want to know who's going to be involved in the choice, but I just know that has to happen. So it's a push and pull between planning what needs to happen and then figuring out how it happens as I write. Yeah.
I have like such a like sense memory of like being in your living room in LA and you have all of your colored pens, and it's wildly impressive to me, someone who like, you can't even read anything that I write by hand, much less like tens of thousands of words, hundreds of thousands of words at this point.
Yeah, with this one, it would also require, because of all the research going into it, like with other stuff, it's more world building, but this was like, I had this background of research. So an outline was essential for that. So I didn't overwhelm myself to say like, okay, this is stuff you'll get to later. This is stuff you'll get to here. You don't have to front load it. Yeah, we haven't announced yet, but I'm working on another project in this vein, and it's set in a less mythologically heavy world, and I'm having a ton of fun, and I'm outlining it actually a lot less because I can kind of discover that, you know, the world exists in a way that it hasn't before. So it's been a fun process on that one.
Very excited to read it. Why don't we'll do one more question from us, and then we will go to the Q&A, which is, you know, you are both incredible YA novelists, writers. I have read most, if not all, of the things you both have read, you both have written rather. But what was your favorite YA when you were a teen? What did you guys like reading?
So the first answers that come to mind, which are terrible for a writer, are all TV shows, because I went to a very intense high school and didn't have time to read almost anything outside of like what was assigned. So a lot of my favorite stuff was Buffy the Vampire. I was a child of the WB, right? So Buffy, and then the evolution from Gossip Girl and OC, that was kind of the stuff I was super into. But Harry Potter, it was a big one for me growing up, obviously. Hunger Games, I think, came out when we were a little bit closer to college, but that was a huge influence. I know it's not YA, but The Bell Jar was a big one for me. It's kind of in that new adult. And then my favorite modern YA, aside from some of Jess's stuff, is We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. Kind of blew my world apart and to put it back together. So yeah, those are mine. I know Jess probably has, this is the worst question in the world, but does anything come to mind?
No, those are great. I'm doing an OC rewatch right now, so like I'm having a lot of nostalgic feelings about that. And it's still so good. But my favorites, I feel like when I was in like middle school, like YA and maybe like early high school, like YA was really starting to like become its own thing a little bit more. And I remember reading all of, like, it was when like Princess Diaries came out, you know, like that was like my kind of like entry into that world, and like love that whole series. But the Jessica Darling series, like Sloppy Firsts, was like one of my favorites. It's like a whole great, amazing series about like a really funny, awkward girl who's just like going through all the crap you go through at that age. And that was like one of my favorites. It's so fun. And Perks of Being a Wallflower was like huge for me as well. And then I did that like really bratty thing where I tried to like read all the books that were mentioned in that book. And it's like Naked Lunch by William S. Burroughs and like a lot of Kerouac and like stuff like that. And I remember being like 14 reading like Big Sur by Jack Kerouac and being like, I don't understand any of this, but like look how intellectual I am. Like I remember my mom being like, why are you reading Naked Lunch? Like that man is on acid the whole time. Like please, let's get you something else. And I was like, but he was reading it in this book that I loved. Anyway, that is all to say that like I feel like the YA genre has or it's not even a genre, like the YA market has just like blown up since we've become adults, and it's just like so amazing to see the kinds of literature that's out there for teens right now. Like Zach, your book features what, like mostly, if not everybody in this book is like on the LGBTQIA like spectrum, and like it features such a diverse cast, and there's like it's like a choices novel about tarot. Like how amazing is that? Like that never would have existed like in previous decades, I think. And it's just like, I don't know, I'm just like so psyched by what is out there for readers of like all interests. And something that I love about this book is that like if you're somebody, like I think a lot of teenagers like get really dismayed or like turned off from reading when they get to a traditional book that like doesn't engage them, and then they feel like there's something wrong with them. But if we create literature that engages them in a different way, whether it's like, you know, a graphic novel or like a choices novel where there's like starts and stops, and like some kids like can't maintain like that, you know, the focus to like keep going and going and going all the time. And if they read a novel like this where there's like a lot of points of entry, I just feel like it's such a great way to like enter literature in a new way that hasn't been done before. That's my long-winded way of just saying that I'm really excited that stuff like this is on the market now and like reaching younger people who like need various points of entries into reading.
Yep, they always say you should write this. I mean, like we're writing the stuff we wish existed when we were teenagers, right? So very happy to be, and I always say, especially like young writers, whenever I go back to college or anything, the mediums that I'm writing in wouldn't have existed before, right? So like digitally, I couldn't have, the career that I ended up finding for myself didn't exist 2 years prior to graduating. So just, you know, don't worry too much about like in its own way, the universe works it out. Works it out for you. And I would never have said as a young kid that I was setting out to be an interactive writer. And it turns out that's like exactly where I'm meant to be. And that kind of happened to me, not from me. So talk about
well,
this.
I think that leads really nicely into one of the questions in the Q&A, which is what attracts you to writing interactive stories rather than traditional fiction?
Good question. It's a really good question, especially because career-wise, it is something that I kind of fell into over and over again. So it never has felt like I've made the choice to do interactive over linear. It's just that interactive is always what has worked for me and what people have asked for from me. And so it's taken me some time to catch up to like, oh yeah, that's what I meant to do. And I think I'm uniquely suited for it because of all the way that my brain works with plot. And as my little brother can attest, growing up, I would always make up these little RPG games. Like I remember when McDonald's had Pokemon, I made up like a little game for the two of us, and we would like race to get Happy Meals so we can get new figures, so I could write up new stats for them. And I think even in third grade, I tried writing a choose your own adventure. So there's something about the kind of like classic role playing game in it that my brain is just drawn to. And then kind of on a spiritual side, I think it's very possible to engage readers in really important questions while making it fun and like not feeling like you're learning anything, right? So you're on this tarot adventure and you're in a haunted house and you're in a tarot maze, and inadvertently you're making decisions about whether you believe in big things like God. Basically, do you believe that there's a plan or not, right? So engaging on that level, it's something that in its best form, when readers have written back about my digital stuff, they say, you got me thinking about something I never would have otherwise. And to me, that is like the highest calling as a writer. So if done right, Interactive can bridge that gap even more.
Totally. I'm gonna pick another question for you. Which Major Detours character are you most like, and who is your favorite character? Maybe they're the same, maybe they're not.
Interesting. So the one that I most like is, there's one that's an amalgam of a few of my gay friends, and I kind of mentioned it in the back of the novel. But I'm very much so a Chase, and Chase has taken a lot of inspiration from me. The other main character, Amelia, is also a lot like me in separate ways. And the kind of character turns they both take are both inspired by lessons I've had to learn as I got older. And I won't say what they are because it's a spoiler alert. I think my favorite character is Cleo, though. She's the most unlike me. She surprised me the most when I was writing her. And she was just super fun. And also she's based in part on Miss Julia Rubin. So so that's a pretty easy answer. I should also say that Logan is based in part on one of my best friends and my husband. So I'm hard not to love that one too.
I knew this going into it that you were like, you helped inspire Cleo, and I was just thrilled every time she showed up. I was like, she's so cool. I'm so honored. I'm so
very stylish, very skeptical in all the ways that you have proven to be in a positive way on this panel.
Can't be a journalist any other way.
Exactly.
Really, that's definitely true. Oh my gosh, I love that. I did not know that Cleo was inspired by Julia, and I like totally see it and love it so much. Before we ask a couple more questions, I just want to remind everybody that if you want to purchase a book from Greenlight, you can do so right now. There's some links in the chat, I believe. And if you want Zach to sign your book, he's going to be in New York signing books. So feel free to, when you make your purchase through Greenlight, just like write a little note that you'd like Zach to sign it, and he will, which is really cool. And I'm totally going to get you to sign my book at one point. Okay, so one more question. How many different scenarios are possible when you're reading? I don't know if you have a specific number in mind, but you can also say like, like spiritually, how many choices, or like, logistically, like what?
Yeah,
feel free to,
practical answers and then some less practical answers. So on a fundamental level, we kind of designed it and thought of it to be read twice. And if you read it twice, there's and make the opposite. So every option, I should say, has two choices. So if you kind of go through and make one set of choices and then go back through and make the opposite set of choices, there will be two kind of fundamentally different experiences. Of course, how you combine those choices has infinite possibilities, right? So, so functionally, there are two major alternate endings in terms of the mystery. There are two major alternate endings for each big romance. And those happen as sets of independent choices. So while there are like two major sets of endings depending on your reading, the combinations of endings you get and the combination of pathways you get to them are much more varied than just two readings. So that's kind of an unsatisfying answer, but it's not like you get to 4 different endings. You'll get to, at this point, 2 different endings, and then maybe you'll get here and you'll get to 2 different endings, and the combinations of the endings vary quite a bit. And then plugging in your choices into that personality back matter, there are 4 different corners you can get sorted into every time, and 4 different character types and horoscopes. So they're kind of 12 possibilities there. So I don't know what the math is on that, but there's a lot of different combinations. Though reading it twice, you're going to get the backbone of the same story. It's kind of the flavors and the big endings that change.
I'm going to ask one last question, which is from Kyle. If you could choose to go on a road trip with me and Jess, where would you go?
Oh man, where would I go? I've never been to Canada. So I would go to New York, and I would want us to go to like a Niagara Falls, and much like Cleo, I would trust all of the food to Julia, and I would trust the soundtrack to Jess. So it would be an excellent trip, and we would get along very well on a road trip. Do you have an answer to that?
I mean, I love that. I love a waterfall, so Niagara Falls is great. I did like a Southwest road trip that I really was into, and would definitely do that again. I have to think about this, but yeah, I mean, I feel like there's large swaths of the country I haven't seen that are so beautiful, and while I love Brooklyn, it's nice to have some like wide open spaces.
I feel like I kind of want to pick something really kitschy and like a specific destination where we like are going to experience something wild together. So my pick would either be Dollywood or like the Elvis place. What is it, Graceland? Like I feel like we gotta go somewhere weird and like get some weird souvenirs to bring home.
My husband's number one like American destination that he's not yet been to is Dollywood. So that will be a very popular answer.
Oh,
I've heard like really good things.
I've only heard good things. Yeah, like I think that is a genius answer. I think we need
right. Okay, maybe we'll go, and then we can get some great like Southern food on the way.
Absolutely.
I'll do some Googling for us.
Great. Perfect. Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I just want to congratulate Zach again on the release of Major Detours. You guys, this book it's just so exciting and special and creative, and I'm so happy we could all celebrate Zach tonight.
Thanks. I'm just back to say thanks so much to all of you guys for spending time together and letting all of us hang out with you, for talking about Major Detours. It's so fun. It's so exciting. I hope you guys do take a road trip together, and then you can all write about it and we can all see what that was like. But thank you so much again. Again, the link to buy Major Detours is in the chat. Zach, we will see you at the store next week to sign, and folks can request their signed copies on the website as well. So thank you guys. Have a great evening. Take care.
This is wonderful.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.